Well, welcome. My name is Scott Rubin, and I'm Howard's number 2 kid of 4. And the way that we want to start our time together is, if you knew my dad much, you knew that he was so proud to have served in the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps Honor Guard is here to present military honors, and so I would like to welcome them to do that now.
Commission, please send us back the symbol preaching for the most honorable and faithful service.
I think my dad would want us to clap for that. If you knew Dad at all, he was a proud Marine and he liked to wear his hat in many places. I think not just to advertise that he was a Marine, but also to invite any conversation that anyone would want to have about any of the armed services. So 3 different points in this service, we are going to enjoy some music from songs that were very special to my dad. From friends of his from the group De Colores, which was very meaningful to him in his own spiritual walk of his life. And so I want to thank these friends for doing that. And there may or may not be music on the seats. A more organized pastor would know that. So if there are no words, then just enjoy, sing along. Thank you, friends.
Announcing
thanks. Those words were very meaningful to my dad. And as we get started, I just want to say a welcome to all of you. It's hard to be in a room like this without thinking about the fact that my dad would have loved to be here. And you know him, if you know him well, he would have walked from person to person. He would have shaken your hand, probably with two of his hands, so he could hold on to you for a while and keep you there and ask you some questions. But he would be so honored that you would be here today. And before we move along in our service, I want to recognize my older brother, Jeff. There's Jeff. My sisters, Karen and Ann, to say, you all, we teamed up. We walked with him. I'm proud of you. Proud to be one of you. And I think he would say that we've done good together. So grateful to each of you. My son Dawson is going to come and read a couple of things for you at this moment before we hear another song.
Grandpa was a storyteller, as many of you likely know if you got any time with him. And so here is Grandpa's story. Howard Walter Rubin of Grand Rapids died Sunday, September 8th, 2024 at Cascade Trails Assisted Living in Grand Rapids, surrounded by his family members and caring staff from Cascade Trails and Emmanuel Hospice. He was 87. Howard was born in Detroit, Michigan on February 7th, 1937. He graduated from Lakewood High in Lakewood, Ohio. He served in the U.S. Marine Corps from 1956 to 1959. Howard married Carolyn Ann Hoover on December 30th, 1961 at St. James Episcopal Church in Grosse Ile. They enjoyed nearly 60 years of marriage together, and Carolyn died on July 13th, 2021. Carolyn and Howard lived in Detroit several months before moving to Knoxville, Tennessee, Cincinnati, Ohio, and finally Kentwood, Michigan in 1976. Where he lived the rest of his life. Howard supported his family as a salesman for 3M and would often say, "Let's spend some 3M money." Howard's Christian faith sustained him throughout his life. He served at church as an elder, sang in the choir with a beautiful voice, and was part of the prayer team and attended many Bible studies. Howard loved meeting new people. In his own words, "I already know about me. I like to hear other people's stories." He was preceded in death by his parents Norbert and Helen, his brother John Regan, and his sister-in-law Joan Wilson, and Mickey, and his brother-in-laws James and Joseph. Howard will be lovingly remembered by all of his family: Jeff and Stephanie, Scott and Lynette, Karen and Chris, Ann and Sandra, and grandchildren Tanner, Dawson, Rachel, Brock, Ashley, Emily, Isabel, Dana, Logan, Betsy. Many nieces and nephews, many cherished friends, including forever friends Jane and Doug. Grandpa asked for Psalm 23 to be read at his funeral. So here's that. Psalm 23 says, "The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and your unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever." Amen.
was great. I am imagining my dad belting that out. Not always in key, but loud. We have a few tributes that we would like to be able to share, a few stories, and those folks know the order that they're supposed to go in. If they don't, you can just look at me and I'll nod at you. But we're going to start with one of my dad's longtime friends, Doug Maxim. Doug and Jane have been friends for years and years, and Doug assured me that he would not go year by year in his remembrances. But Doug, I want to invite you up now, and we'll go in order from there.
Well, this feels familiar. 3 years ago, we were here saying goodbye to Carolyn. And so today we remember Howard, and your mom and dad are at home. And so we come to celebrate his life and her life. He longed to be with her. He longed to be with her. And so we celebrate. I'm looking at the two babies in the back. One of them is my granddaughter, my great-granddaughter. My granddaughter is holding her daughter. I don't know the other one, but welcome to you. Take good care of those little ones. Anyway, my wife and I have spent the last couple days preparing for this. We want to remember Howard and remember Carolyn too. But today we celebrate Howard's life. And so I've got notes. So I've got them lined up here. My wife obviously is the director of our. I got them lined up here. Howard Rubin was my best friend. I lost a friend in COVID, and now it's Howard. He was truly like a brother to me. My brothers are off in the east side of Michigan. And Howard stood in for them. He and I spent a lot of time together. But I want to let you know that in April of 1981, our pastor at Ascension Lutheran Church asked for prayers for our family. Our 14-year-old daughter had been diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, which is the cancer of the lymph systems. She gave us a granddaughter and now a great-granddaughter. 2 days later, after Howard and Carolyn and your family met the Ascension Lutheran Church, there was a knock on our door. It was late morning. A gentle man whom Jane recognized from Ascension, a new family, you were a new family then, who sat in front of us. And he said, "Hi, I'm Howard Rubin. We are new at church, and we'll pray for your family. My good wife asked me to deliver these cookies." Does that sound familiar? Have any of you partaken of chocolate chip cookies? Anyway, he went on to say, "We are so sorry." And he walked off the porch, tears on his cheeks, And our Rubin Maxim families began a 43-year friendship. And so we have a lot of memories, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but I'm going to spend a little bit of time. Some memories, it's not same, some memories. Sharing lots of meals, we tended to do that, and learning that Howard didn't like vegetables. Except lima beans. I don't understand that. Some of you are shaking your head. We love to play hand and foot. Anybody play hand and foot? By the hour. And we also tried to teach Howard how to play bridge. But it was not his favorite. So he was reluctant. Carolyn was so-so too. We vacationed with them in Branson, Myrtle Beach, Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and Petoskey. Petoskey. That's familiar. We end up having one of your kids there. Page 3. Canadian Lakes. We moved up to Canadian Lakes, and so they came up oftentimes to spend times with us. Howard and I played golf together, racquetball, pickleball. We went to swim meets. He was always walking close beside us. And when our daughter got sick, we lived at their house for 2 months. And so they took care of us while Jill was in palliative care. Jane wrote down, he was walking close, offering strong arms, sharing tears with us. He visited our son regularly when we stayed in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach. Howard loved my son as his son. He was part of your family. And Todd was loving him and Carolyn as his family. Howard took my wife to her surgery. She had several surgeries over the years, and Howard was also a De Caloris brother, and I can picture him wanting to sing with us this morning. We shared the love of one another and of Jesus Christ. Shedding tears together as Carolyn, my girl Carolyn, as she entered the journey called Alzheimer's. Howard was an 100% extrovert. He was a pure extrovert. He was a 100% salesman. He could sell. He had a deep love for his children and his grandchildren, and you're going to hear from them, I believe, after I'm done. The deep love for his children, but in the last year, the extrovert became quiet at times. I suspect that you've noticed some quiet, more quiet, more still, reclusive. He was mourning his girl. He was my friend and my brother, and Jane was his sister. sister that he never had. Then the pain came, and then hospice came, and he decided that he was ready to meet with his bride, Carolyn. I will miss him every day, the laughter, the tears. I've kissed him on the forehead a couple times and told him that we will be along soon. And we will be in eternal rest. So, two old buddies sharing heaven with two loving sisters, Carolyn and Jane. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Anne, and I am the last and number 4 of the 4 Rubin children. A great position, I recommend it. Thank you all for being here today. Some of you came from down the road, and some of you came from very far away, and we're grateful for all of your faces. Our family is honored by your presence, and as my brother said, I know my dad would love to be here. He would love this. Thank you. As mentioned in his obituary, one of my dad's favorite things to do was to meet people. He craved connection and he loved asking questions. And another favorite thing of Dad's to do after he met those people was to keep in touch with them. He loved phone calls. He was modern enough that he sent some emails, but he was especially fond of sending cards. And I'm not going to ask, but I'll bet many of you in here have received at least one card from Howard. As a tribute to him, I invite you to think of a person or two that you would like to send a card to this week. Think it would make my dad smile to think of the ripple of surprise and joy that would cause for people to open their mailbox and find a card. You have to buy a stamp. They sell them at grocery stores if you haven't bought one in a while. We can't help you out with the stamp part, but we can help you out with the card part. My dad loved sending cards so much that he had a pretty big backstock of them, and we have them here today. They're sorted by occasion. They're down by the lunch food, and we have bags for you as well, so we invite you to take 1 or 5 or however many you would like. I was surprised when I was sorting them that I didn't have to have a sort of R-rated section, because I know that he sometimes sent cards that could border on inappropriate, but perhaps he used all those up. At any rate, please help yourself and just spread that joy into the world. My dad loved receiving mail too, and I loved finding just the right card to send, or clipping an article or a joke or something to send. Often the card had an eagle on it. My dad loved bald eagles, and I found this one in his sock drawer that he had saved. I sent it a couple years ago. The morning my dad died, I sang him the lyric printed on the memorial card. He will raise you up on eagle's wings. It was a little off key, and I apologized. My sister's a better singer than I, but I think he thought it was all right. I can't send my dad cards anymore, but I live in Minnesota, where we have a large population of bald eagles. So all I need to do is look to the sky to be reminded of him. He's flying high and free with my mom. And I'm grateful to all of you for being here. I love you, Dad. Thank you for everything. Thank you.
I met Howard, I called him Pop, in the spring of 1989 when Scott and I started dating. Pop quickly became endeared to me because he laughed at my humor, and that is very hard to come by. When we're younger, we often think we've got it all figured out. But the further down the road we go, we realize we don't. And that was true for me over the 35 years that I knew Pop. I grew and changed, and I learned a lot. But one of the many things I so appreciated about Pop is that he also was a man who realized he didn't have it all figured out. I came to see over the years that he was a curious guy. He was open to learning about new things or thinking about things in a new way. I saw this in him as he would engage in conversations with people about what they did or an experience they had, or just asking question after question. He was still open to learning even in his 80s. Because he's so interested in so many people, he'd get invited to lots of events. Just last year, I was at his house, and he asked me to help him figure out directions to get to a wedding that he was going to go to. I asked him if he wanted to learn how to use Google Maps, and he said yes. So he figured it out. I showed him, and he figured it out. He had a Post-it note on his computer that reminded him how to do it. In his 80s, that really impressed me. The place I experienced this openness to learn that impacted me the most was in his relationship with Jesus. I remember at a church service I was at with Pop and Mom, Carolyn, over 10 years ago. The pastor was giving a message based on the lyrics from the song Amazing Grace. Most of us are probably familiar with this song, but as a quick refresher, here are the first 2 verses, and I'm not singing them. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. The song sheet, which I have right here, actually read, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me, and there was a blank to write your name. The pastor encouraged each of us to write our name. That day, I watched Pop write his name in that blank. Later, Pop and I were talking about the service, and he shared how deeply it hit him. What profoundly struck me was that even though Pop had heard those lyrics before, somehow that day, he grasped them in a new way in his heart. That amazing grace became even more real and personal to him. Pop would have been the first to tell you that he was far from perfect, but his faith inspired me. I think for many years he went to church because it was just part of his normal rhythm, something that falls in the category of should do. But after this amazing grace service, there was a shift. He knew how much help he needed from God to live his life. I watched him take what he was learning at church or from reading and try to apply it, about praying, about being generous, not being attached to material possessions, putting others' interests above his own. He served others, and he was generous and kind and interested because he understood this life wasn't about him. Did he do it perfectly? He'd be the first to say not even close. But I had the privilege of having some really cool conversations with him and hearing what he was learning about or wrestling with and what it looks like to love people better. He was very aware he couldn't do it from his own strength. Until his last day, he knew life wasn't about him, but about loving others with the love that Jesus gave him. From his hospital bed, he'd ask those who were caring for him how they were and about their families. He wanted to buy gift cards to give to the staff at Mary Free Bed before he left there to thank them. His last days were filled with making sure those in his life, especially his family, knew how much he meant to them. And even in his imperfection and brokenness, he tried to express love in the best ways he could. I am so grateful for the example Pop left for me and others of knowing that he needed grace and forgiveness every day. I think Pop's desire would be that everyone would have their amazing grace moment and understand what Pop grasped fully later in his life about who he truly was, a sinner in need of grace. It was a gift to have known you, Pop.
I'm Karen, number 3. They say that when I was a little kid, Dad always liked to do peekaboo with little kids, and apparently when I wanted him to play that with me, I would say Pete instead of peek. So forever I was Pete to Dad. I still have a voicemail from him. Hi, Pete. Dad. He would write it on cards, and when we first got married, Chris was like, "Who's Pete?" During the last days of Dad's life, he was doing a lot of thinking, and he would get real introverted sometimes and quiet, and that wasn't normal for him. And one day I said, "What you thinking about, Dad?" He said, "What should I say to your mother when I see her?" I said, "How about, 'Hi, I'm here.'" I had shared that with one of the gals that came to visit him, and this morning she reminded me of that, and she said, "I wonder what he said." I guess the good news is that someday we'll know. 5 years ago, Dad asked me if I would go with him to pre-plan Mom's funeral and his, and I remember being kind of not excited about that. Honestly, I'm not excited about being here today either, but I went, and it was interesting. I was glad that he could be there to express the things that were important to him about today, and one of the things he requested was that I would read this, which he saved from Father's Day of 2004. So it was originally called My Father's Handkerchief, but then as I got thinking about it, I changed it to My Dad's Hanky because that was a little bit more the way he was. He specifically told us he did not want a tie on in his casket. He wore enough of those when he was working, and he was just done with ties. So he did have a suit that I helped him pick out several years ago. As you would probably know, he became close with a lot of young people and got invited to weddings, and he called it his wedding clothes. And he's wearing that today. So I recently found one of my dad's handkerchiefs in some laundry I had washed at my parents' house. I was thinking about putting it into an envelope to return it to him tonight, but when I picked it up, a flood of memories came rushing into my mind. I don't remember a time when Dad didn't have a hanky in his pocket, and this one looks exactly like all the others. It's a plain white square, no embroidery or monogram, and frankly, it's a little old-fashioned. I don't remember any of my friends' dads having hankies, but over the years, it's just became something I expected Dad to have. His hankies aren't the kind that you would press neatly and put in a pocket on a suit, but their purpose was much more functional. As I was growing up, I can remember Dad using his hanky to dry sniffly noses and wipe away blood from scraped knees and elbows. He used one to get a better grip on a tooth, or to wipe ice cream off my face or my children's faces, and our frequent trips to Dairy Queen. Dad made a priority of attending all of our swim meets. For me, that was 4th grade through college, and I can remember him using his hanky to mop the sweat off of his brow during those long, hot meets. On our hot, humid wedding day, he had a hanky with him, not just to dry his face, but his tears before he walked me down the aisle. And I'm pretty sure that he's used it on each one of his grandkids at some point or another. In a lot of ways, Dad's hankies remind me of him. Nothing flashy to call attention to either of them, but they're dependable and reliable and give me support in every situation. I use the term old-fashioned in the kindest sense, since Dad tended to rely on old-fashioned concepts like manners and respect and the importance of helping other people when you can. And foreshadowing here, I said, just as I can't imagine Dad without his hanky, can't imagine my life without my dad. Love you, Dad.
Boy, that's a tough one to follow. So I'm just going to unapologetically read this and not make eye contact with anybody. So, I'm going to start off by bragging a little bit. All of you out there have some connection to Howard Rubin that brought you here today under many titles: friend, relative, past coworker. And if you don't, maybe you're at the wrong place. It's September 14th, if that's helpful. But I was one of the lucky few I was able to call him Grandpa. So I was thinking over the past week about what I was going to say during my time here. Scott was putting the service together. He told me I'd get tossed out if he didn't like it, so I had to consider it very carefully. There are many positive attributes I admired about Grandpa, so I was having a hard time narrowing it down to just one. So I was driving to class at Ferris State the other day. A song came on that I hadn't heard in a while. It's a 1994 country chart hit called "Daddy Never Was the Cadillac Kind." It details the story of a son who can't understand why his dad isn't impressed by material possessions and instead opts for a humble, giving lifestyle. One of the lines in the song goes, "Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. He said some things would just glitter and shine. He taught us that love was one thing that money couldn't buy." This song got me thinking about Grandpa and the legacy he chose to create. After retiring, he could have kicked back and just taken it easy his whole life, but instead he took every opportunity to help others, readily offering his time, expertise, advice, and finances to those who could benefit. To him and my grandma, helping others was far more important than a status symbol like a big fancy car. I had the opportunity to live with Grandpa this summer as I completed an internship for my college classes. One of my daily tasks was emptying the mailbox, and not a day went by without there being multiple letters from various nonprofit organizations referring to their beloved past donor or something of the sort. Well, some of those companies employ marketing strategies similar to those of seagulls at the beach when you give them bread. It was quite evident that Grandpa was a man who wasn't afraid to bless others with what he had. So the song closes out with, "Daddy left us last November. I don't remember him ever looking better, all laid out in his Sunday best. I'm sure that instead of all that attention, all he'd have wanted was a few words mentioned, a simple man simply laid to rest. As they drove him away in that big Cadillac, with a tear in my eye, I had to laugh, because Daddy never was the Cadillac kind. He said some things would just glitter and shine. Well, just this once, I hope Daddy enjoyed the ride, because Daddy never was the Cadillac kind." And although the song might not really have been his style, I don't know if he was much of a country guy, I think he would have liked the lyrics and enjoy his ride knowing that he touched the lives of so many people. Thank you.
I'm Betsy. I'm number 8. A few years ago, we were asked to write legacy letters regarding the impact my grandpa had on us. I'm going to share one of mine, and if he's tired of it, too bad. My grandpa was meaningful. He did things with purpose. He's also the best storyteller. I would never get tired of hearing his stories because something was different every time.
That's true.
He used to say that he would be there for us, even if we were playing tiddlywinks in Iowa. I remember a specific 8th grade band concert he surprised me at. You have to really love someone to go to a middle school band concert. I couldn't believe he drove 3 hours just to see that. And now I realize he would have driven 30 hours. If you've met my grandpa, he's probably told you a joke. He could always make me laugh. His sense of humor and smile are something I could never forget. When Grandpa was talking to you, it was like you were the most important person in the world. Thank you for setting such a great example for me, Grandpa. I'll cause some trouble down here for you. I love you more.
Hi, I'm Tanner. I'm one of the grandkids. Number one, yeah. Well, the first one, I don't know about number one, but when I think about Grandpa, one of the things that I appreciate most about him is his ability to, it was incredible to be have such a deep conversation about something so important in one moment, and the next moment be the biggest hooligan you've ever met in your life. So I'm going to talk about the latter a little bit, and then Dawson's going to share about the former, and Brock will close us out. So I got the privilege of spending some one-on-one time with Grandpa the week before he passed, and I spent a lot of time sitting by his bed, just watching him sleep, but there was a few moments where he'd wake up and we'd have a little interaction, and some of them were a little confused, but some of them were serious, and some of them were just him. I remember one time he woke up and looked at me, kind of got oriented with where he was. Without saying anything, he just kind of flexed for me, and he gave me a little smirk, and I was like, I don't know what we're doing here, but all right, I'm gonna roll with it. So I'm like, hey, nice biceps. Chuckled a little bit, gave me another flex, another one, and then he fell back asleep. So that one moment, and then, the next moment he wakes up and we talk about going to be with Grandma in heaven and something really meaningful. And I'm just so grateful for the way that he balanced those things. It was incredible.
I'm number 2, Dawson, and one of the moments that in this past week I was reflecting on Grandpa about, he had very, very many silly moments in storytelling, but one of the very few times he was stern with me, and if Grandpa's stern, you know to pay attention because it's so rare. We were at a basketball tournament in high school, and Grandpa was a self-proclaimed, what he called the big eraser when we were growing up, because we could never shoot a hoop without him blocking it. It seemed like a little bit of an unfair advantage being 6 foot against a 2 foot little kid. But Grandpa and I bonded over basketball all throughout us growing up. And I always struggled with my confidence when it came to being on the basketball court. And one of the few times that Grandpa was stern with me was after a particular game where I was not very confident and chose to pass the ball much more than I shot it. And Grandpa, he paused to see me, as he did with so many people. And he told me to choose confidence in myself because I'd put in the practice and put in the work. And he told me to have fun. And those 2 encouragements were things that I hold really close to my heart. I just know that Grandpa cared deeply for every person he came in contact with. And if he could give every person in the room one encouragement, it would be to choose confidence and to have fun. And I feel really, really grateful for that conversation with Grandpa.
I'm Brock. I'm number 4. And kind of like when Tanner and Dawson and I had a chemistry class together in college, I took all the notes. So I'll be doing that today. But I just want to say it's an honor to stand here today and share some words about Grandpa Howard. I firmly believe that his life and legacy has formed me, and I can say Tanner and Dawson, and clearly Logan, thank you for your words this morning. Beautiful. Into better young men, and life already feels emptier without him. It would be impossible, however, not to carry him with us in our remaining days, and I imagine that many of you in this room feel the same. Though there's an innumerable amount of words that I could use to describe Grandpa Howard, I've chosen 5 quick ones I think Grandpa would have been proud to have his life defined by. First one is Grandpa was silly. When I was in elementary school, I would keep track of all the professional football teams using these little plastic helmets on our windowsills. When Grandpa would come to visit, I would come home from school, and the helmets would always be in the wrong order, and he used to put the Cleveland Browns in first place, which was not true because, as Grandpa would tell you, the Browns stink. Seeing these helmets would put me in such a tizzy. I would say, Grandpa, stop switching my helmets when I'm gone, to which he would respond, well, that wasn't me, but they sure look in the right order. The gleam in his eye was a dead giveaway. They were not. Additionally, Grandpa lived an undivided life. A conversation with Grandpa was never vague. He wanted all the details. Brock, I remember you telling me about this. How's it going? How's that one friend of yours who's a nurse downtown at that hospital? How's Ashley's job going? Grandpa knew moments together were precious, and he wanted to squeeze a life and detail out of every conversation. He knew that attention made the other person feel loved, undivided, even if it was at the risk of being a little nosy. Grandpa was a provider. There was no expense to be spared when it came to those he loved. Did you want food? Just order some more. Did you need a cherry Coke? It's in the fridge. Did your friend's second cousin have a birthday? They might just get a card in the mail from Grandpa, possibly with a few bucks in it. Grandpa knew that life was more than having things. It was what he could give away, and he was darn good at it. Grandpa was ever learning. I remember countless conversations with Grandpa that started, "Now, Brock, help me understand." One of Grandpa's biggest adversaries was technology. The man once called me on FaceTime and proceeded to hold the video up to his ear for the entire call. I got a better view of what was going on in there than I ever would have asked for. But, as has been mentioned multiple times, in all seriousness, Grandpa always wanted to keep learning. He knew that for as long as he was here, there was more to understand, because understanding more meant an ability to care and empathize better. And last, Grandpa was relational. Not just with fellow people, as evidenced by all those in this room today. As you can tell, there were extra chairs that needed to be added, and I think he would have loved that. But I saw this most clearly in our grandfather in two ways. First was in how he loved his wife, our Grandma Carolyn. I saw him lay his life down for her, evidenced by almost 60 years of marriage, and even in her final years, visiting her every day as she wrestled with her memory. And Grandpa, I aim to do the same for my future wife as you did for yours. But also, Grandpa truly believed in a relationship with Jesus Christ, his Father in heaven. It guided his steps, it shaped his prayers, and it led him to his knees when he encountered his brokenness and mistakes, which he would admit were quite a few. But his relationship with God was truly a friendship, and it shaped him to get better every day, as he would always tell me. So this was Grandpa Howard's recipe for a life well lived. Silly, undivided, provider, ever-learning, relational. If you know me, you might know what's coming, but that spells S-U-P-E-R. And in the words of Grandpa himself, he would say, "Brock, that's just super." And Grandpa, it is. Your life was truly super, and we love you more.
Thanks to all of you. I'm glad that that's recorded because I'll watch those all again. You guys were fantastic. Brock mentions almost 60 years of marriage, and Grandpa multiple times had the goal to make it to next Saturday when Brock and Ashley will get married and follow in that example. So what we're going to do now, and we're kind of turning the corner, we have, as an extended family, collected all kinds of photos of Grandpa over these last weeks, reminisced about things, remembered things, and what we would like to do is take a little look at this just for a few minutes. There's a longer version that we'll be playing afterwards. Don't know how well you can see that. If you need to move up to a closer chair, I'm sure you're welcome to. But these are just some visual remembrances of the dad and the grandpa that we love.
Sunlight fell and reminded me life can be so gracious sometimes. And I felt like everything around me was connected somehow. At night I hear the rhythm of the ocean as it breaks on the shore. And I think about all the things that I am grateful for. And they say, hold on to the ones you love. Keep them close to you. They say, hold on to this time we have, and let the light shine through. Sometimes I get a little bit emotional when I see love unfold. Two hearts bound by reflections of memories they'll forever hold. They say, hold on to the ones you love. Keep them close to you. They say, hold on to this time we have, and let the light shine through. There are blessings all around you. Open up your eyes. Feel the sunlight fall upon you. Let it free your mind. There are blessings all around you. Take a step outside. Let your heart shine in a new light. See it come alive. They say, hold on to the ones you love. Keep them close to you. They say, hold on to this time we have, and let the light shine through.
Well, you can see that as much as Dad loved people, he also didn't mind a camera either. There's a video that Tanner had. We would video Grandpa in all kinds of different scenarios, but one time in kind of a serious moment, Tanner said, "Hey, Grandpa, this is maybe, I don't know, a couple of years ago, Tanner said, how would you like to be remembered someday?" And he thought about it, and sometimes, you never know if you're going to get a silly answer or a serious one. He said, "I would like to be remembered as someone who tried." I think you did. Hey, I want to, as we start to turn towards wrapping up, I want to just share a few thoughts. And I don't know how many churches still do this, but some churches that we were part of growing up, they would have what they called a children's sermon. They would do it before the main sermon. They kind of have to gather the kids around. And my dad would often say to me, sometimes I get more out of that children's sermon than I do out of the person talking about the long, complicated version. And I think it was often because there was one main point, and if Dad was being honest, I think he liked it because it was shorter. So that's what I want to be able to do at this moment. And also, oftentimes, it would have some kind of a visual aid associated, which I think was helpful for my dad. And when Dad and I talked about this day, because we talked about this day and talked about what would you like to be shared, what would you like us to talk about? He talked to several of us about this, and what he asked me is he said, "I would love it if you could try to make clear what I believe." And I said, all right, and we had numerous conversations about that. But to take you back and even to move into the children's sermon portion of the moment, when we were growing up, Jeff was born, I don't know where you were born, Jeff, but I knew you grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee. And if I do my math right, I didn't grow up in Knoxville, but I'm pretty sure I was conceived there. Then I lived for 10 years in Cincinnati, and my dad would travel pretty extensively. Oftentimes he would leave on a Sunday night doing his sales career, get back on a Friday night or a Saturday morning. And when he would come home, a lot of times I remember him open up his suitcase on the bed. And we would gather around and, just, I think partially my mom would probably shoo us into the bedroom, like, go bother your dad. I've had you all week. Like, go bother him. So we'd watch him unpack his suitcase. A lot of times when people go on business trips, they'll bring home some trinkets for their kids, right? Well, we didn't have a lot of money. So a lot of times, the only trinkets that we had, yeah, Karen knows. I got you a little soap from the hotel room. So you tried that way. Well, Karen brings up a good point, and I actually have that written in my notes, because sometimes he'd call on companies and they would give him promo items. And he'd be like, oh, great, that's better than a little soap. But he would always say, thanks, you have one, that's really cool. Is there a way I could get 4? Because if I can't get 4, I can't bring any. I can't bring any, because he knew what that would do to us at home. Now, Dad's spiritual life, we've referenced it a couple times, but it evolved over time. And I have a very specific memory of riding home from him, with him from church one weekend. And I don't know why it was just me and him, but I remember vividly, we must have taken 2 cars, maybe someone had a sporting event or some kind of an activity. But I remember feeling so bored by church. So I didn't understand it. And if I'm honest, it seemed to me like Dad was pretty bored too. And I remember saying to him, Dad, why do we do this? Like, I'm just the kid, but you could say the word and we could just be home watching football right now. Like, we don't need to do this. And Dad was on a journey, I think, of learning that faith in God isn't the same as church attendance or really earning anything for yourself. And open up his Bible. My sister shared with me that they found his Bible, and there's a couple of verses that he had underlined. Honestly, if you look in his Bible, there was a lot that was underlined. For some reason, he took a straight edge ruler and underlined each, I don't know why, but that was his thing. So I want to read a couple of verses to you that were meaningful to Dad, and one of them is from Ephesians chapter 2, verse 8 and 9, because it's been referenced already. Dad was not counting on himself. Ephesians 2, 8 and 9 says, for it's grace, it's by grace that you've been saved through faith, and this is not from yourself. It's the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. And then you might know, maybe one of the most famous verses there is, but there's a verse that follows it that's equally significant. In John 3, verse 16 and 17, it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shouldn't perish, but should have eternal life. And then I love verse 17, and I don't think it gets enough credit. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And I think a lot of Christians get that wrong, because I think there's a lot of condemnation that goes on. My dad would be like, nope, that doesn't make sense to me. That's not the Jesus that I know. So Dad's not here anymore. Someone said to me this week, his soul's eternal, even though his body was not. And gosh, I resonate with that. But honestly, friends, in the minute that I have left, I just want to ask you, where is he? Like, where's Dad? Where's Dad? Dad believed what the Bible said about heaven, but what even is that? And I don't know what you believe, but Dad asked me to make clear what he believes. And again, sometimes you think of harps and clouds and endless singing, and honestly, that does not sound very cool to me. A friend of mine wrote a book about heaven a few years ago, and I've read it a couple times now. I got it out and I read it again last week, even before Dad was getting ready to go there. And it connected what the Bible says about heaven. And this guy, over the period of a couple decades, referenced almost 1,000 near-death experiences where someone's physical body would die, and then they would see some things, and he corroborated. It's fascinating. It's not a book report recommendation, but the book is called Imagine Heaven, if that's interesting to you, and you can ask me about it later. But this book is fascinating where it lines up with Scripture. And before you dismiss this kind of an idea as science fiction, if you're curious about where Grandpa Howard believed he was going, I encourage you to pick it up, and here's a little excerpt. It says, those who have difficulty picturing heaven fear it will be boring. Just imagine the exhilarating future that awaits you as God's reward for a life well lived. You've never experienced a gift so great. I'm convinced that God has prepared a future for you with more exhilaration and excitement, more breathtaking beauty, more love and relational depth with friends and family than you've ever experienced on this planet. And the most common denominator of those who've had a glimpse, this author says, they don't want to come back. So the key question, and this is where I'll finish, is how do people get there? Dad did not spend his life trying to assemble a suitcase full of a resume of good deeds to present to someone and say, how about this? Is this enough for me to get in? He was fond of saying, if you knew him, I'm an open book. You can ask me anything. And some of you know him in his older years, and I'm not here to air his dirty laundry, but not all of you know that my dad had some issues at different portions of his life, one that almost cost him his marriage for a while. And if you had a cup of coffee with you, he would not hesitate to sit down and tell you where he steered wrong and what that looked like. But the Bible teaches that all who call on the Lord, the name of the Lord, will be saved. Everyone who reaches out and says, God, I'm not enough on my own. I need you. And again, I'm only sharing what Dad asked me to share, and he was not counting on himself. Lots of you know him as a good man. It's not what he's counting on. He deeply believed that this love is all there is, and he knew that even our resources are just part of our temporary stay here on earth. And I was going through his Bible this week, and this is another verse that I saw. 1 Timothy 6:6-7 says, "Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth." After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world. We can't take anything with us when we leave. And so my request for you, and again, just following my dad's directions, is to ask you to think about that and ask you to write a card. I'm all in for that. I think that's awesome. And I ask you just to think about what you think about that. Maybe have a conversation with someone on that if you want to. My dad was not afraid to die. He wasn't. He's going to miss a whole bunch of people, but he was not afraid of it. And as we wrap up, that's actually the final song that we're going to sing, is Be Not Afraid. Be Not Afraid. So we're going to sing one last song, and then I have a couple things that we're going to finish with. You're not going to want to leave early because it's going to be a grandpa ending. But let's sing this one last song. And friends, again, my dad would have been so grateful for you to be here and would want you to think about what's ahead for you. So let's sing together. Yeah, you can clap for that. Okay, a couple final things as we finish. First is I hope that you know that we have a luncheon available afterwards through some really generous friends of my dad. When things were starting to turn the corner and people were reaching out, someone said, "Do you have plans for what that would look like?" And my siblings and I looked at each other and we're like, "Oh gosh, we haven't even thought about that." And the quote that I heard was, "We have an army of people who would love to be able to feed the people who your dad cared about." So there's luncheon, you walk outside or out the door and then downstairs and just follow people. But hope that you can do that. Now, on your way down there, you're gonna, once you get to the bottom of the stairs, if you turn left, you're gonna walk by an iPad that's on a podium there. And here's the other thing that I would ask you to consider. Dad loves stories. You probably have stories that we do not know. There's a little iPad with a button that you can push and tell a little story about Dad after you get your food or before you get your food or whatever. We would love that. It's not a requirement, obviously, but if you have a moment of something you want to share just for a minute, again, maybe not super traditional. That happens at weddings sometimes. It would be like my dad to say, "That's a great idea. Let's do that at my funeral." Now, the last thing that I want to say is I'm going to pray before we leave, but then as I wrap up my prayer, we're going to end this funeral service in a way that I'm willing to bet you've never ended a funeral service before, unless you were at my mom's funeral. And that is, there's a song that my dad loved and sort of became a bit of an anthem for him 30-some years ago at a wedding, where Kool and the Gang sang the song Celebration. It's not a funeral song, okay? I'm telling you, it's not a funeral song. But my dad loved a good celebration, and he was vehement when my mom's time was coming near. He said, "We got to pray that, because I think we can grieve and celebrate at the same time." He was good at celebrating, not so good at grieving. But once I pray, we're going to sit here for maybe 10 or 15 seconds in the awkwardness of Kool and the Gang singing their song. And then our families, whenever Logan or Tanner decide we've heard enough, they'll start to walk down the aisle together, and we'll do that. But I'm just telling you ahead of time, it's going to be weird. It's not a walkout funeral song, but in the same way, and this is what I would ask as you're walking out, our family, and as you catch eyes with someone, you know my dad had eye contact. Almost to a scary place sometimes where you, like, break the look sometimes, Dad. But that's how we're going to finish, and I just want to pray for him. In this moment, again, I just want to finish the way we started and just say thank you so much. People were my dad's treasure. Lots of you, whether it was once, I know there's some people here who had one encounter with him. Lots of you had many. He would look you in the eye, he would give you a 2-hand handshake, and he'd say, "Thanks for coming." So let's pray, and then we'll cue up the music. Father, collectively, we thank you for Howard Walter Rubin. Imperfect man who tried, man who loved. God, thanks for the gift that you gave all of us, some of us in more intense ways, some of us in different ways, but God, we're grateful. God, thank you for what this last hour has represented. God, thank you for the stories that have been shared. Thanks for the remembrance that have been shared. Thanks for the words that have been sung to you. The one that God honored, that Dad honored among all. Got to pray for the food that we're going to eat, not just in a obligatory food blessing kind of a prayer, God, but I pray for the conversations that might happen, the connections that might happen, for the way that you really do offer us the ability to not just sustain life here, but life in the future, life after earth. God, thanks for my dad. Thanks for this place. And God, we grieve. And we also try to celebrate. In Jesus' name, amen. Are you ready?